Joined in studio now by Virginia Tech political science professor Dr. Karen Hult for some of our early analysis here. Obviously, polls still open, but first and foremost, Dr. Hult, thanks as always for joining us here.
Always good to be with you. Thanks.
Well, obviously we've got, about 40 minutes until our polls close. We do have some of those early voting numbers in, especially, really we can compare through Saturday, 3 days out from the election, 1 year, 2026 versus 2024. Now, across the board, lower turnout this year, no presidential primary this time around versus 2024. But what do you make of these numbers, that overall decrease, about 11% in the total turnout when we look at the early voting numbers?
I would say certainly the fact that there's no presidential candidate on the ticket makes a big difference. But I also think it's important to remember that the election changed the date. And so we're now in a period of time in which people don't expect to have an election. People are either getting ready for school to start, and or, as some wags have said, it's either beach or vote, and beach often wins. So they're on vacation, they're getting ready for school. Yeah.
Get some of that election fatigue, maybe even worse this year when you look at the redistricting.
Well, I think the redistricting and the later election, as well as a lot of people are not very satisfied with what's going on in government generally, and that isn't party-based. It really is we're not getting things right in a lot of people's view.
Yeah. When we move next, obviously our statewide race, we're looking at the Senate Republican. Now, no challenger for our incumbent, Mark Warner, but 3 Republicans hoping to be the ones to take a try at unseating him when we get to the general election in November. Now, for this primary, when you look at a decisive victory for one of those candidates versus a narrow victory, what would that ultimately mean if, say, one of these candidates is able to really assert themselves over the other versus if it just kind of comes down to somebody narrowly gets out of there with the nomination?
Well, with 3 candidates, that's always a difficult issue, right? So it may well depend on the split of the votes among the 3 candidates and also the sense in which people know who the candidates are. We've not seen much of this campaign in this part of Virginia, but other parts of the state have.
When we look at, obviously, a couple of district races for us, the 5th and the 9th, the 5th one especially because we have those primaries in both the Democratic side as well as the Republican side. Now, Republicans first, because that's where our incumbent is, John McGuire. He's got a challenger in Melanie Lucero. Now, Lucero says she's dedicated to the Trump agenda, but is that ultimately, in your view, will that be enough when you look at, the Trump endorsement that Republican incumbent McGuire has, as well as just the name recognition that comes with being the incumbent?
I think being the incumbent helps a lot. Not only the Trump endorsement, he also spent this weekend, I guess, with Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in Danville. So he's got a lot of attention from the Trump crowd. But more than that, incumbents have lots of benefits when they run as incumbents.
When we stay in the 5th and we shift over to the other side of the aisle, looking on the Democratic side, we've got 3 candidates on that side going at it. Tom Perriello, probably the first name that jumps off the page as he's trying to make it back to Washington, but he's going to have to go through both Suzanne Kuzinowski and Robert Tracinski to even get that chance. Now, when we were talking earlier looking at Michigan, with some of the Democratic Party shifting away from the so-called establishment, looking at the Democratic socialist rise that we're monitoring a little bit right now, could Perriello's time in Congress in the past as more of that establishment side, is that something that you could see hurting him in a race like this?
It could be, but I would think at least as much it will help him that he's a recognized name, and he also does not really fit into the establishment Republican frame. He has lots of criticisms of wealth redistribution and so forth, so he could, in that sense, set himself apart as well. But the concern with establishment candidates is clearly there.
Now, as we wait for the polls to close, again, now about 35 minutes until we'll get to that point. Anything else that you're watching, either specifically here, but we know a couple other states that we're monitoring around the country as well with their primaries going on simultaneously?
Well, certainly we're looking at Michigan, which is where the big prize is for the governorship, the Senate, and a lot of other places. I'm also looking elsewhere in Virginia, where we have some contested races in the northern part of the state as well as the eastern part of the state, where incumbents in both cases are under some degree of threat. We'll have to look at those too.
All right, Dr. Karen Hult, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you back up once we have the polls, some results, once those polls close again, 7 o'clock.